Welcome to the Everything Podcast, and in this episode, it's going to be quite a different episode. This one is going to be because we're going to talk about mental health a little bit. Now, as you'll know, that kind of the podcast isn't. I try not to kind of what do I mean? Kind of involve real life stuff too much, but if you watch the podcast, especially in season 1 and probably 2 as well, that I mentioned quite a bit that kind of the podcast came out a loss that I had to deal with and come to terms with, and that kind of one of my coping strategies actually was to create this podcast. Now, not in the way that it is now by doing 2 episodes a day, so 14 episodes a week, and even when it was only 1 episode a day, like I say, only. So that was an episode every day, so 7 days a week. But if you actually look at season 1 in particular, because it's the only season where it was kind of, I would do it, it was an episode a month. Like, if we can imagine that. Like, it's a completely different show. But I've read some amazing comments about how the podcast is escapism, and I think that's why I was drawn to create it in the first place, was that it would be kind of it was helping me, because I was basically had to go, I need to distract myself, what can I do? Like, how I am on the podcast is most of who I am, but I'm not how I am on the podcast all the time. Like, it's a slightly more positive version of me, because I couldn't be like that all the time, and obviously you don't want to be here like me kind of on the podcast, especially now that kind of I've decided to do shorter episodes, so they're quicker, and which obviously means I'm able to write and record more in the time that I have available due to my work commitments and volunteering commitments and all the other facets and aspects. That's the word I was looking for. Aspects of my life. But I do want to say a big thank you to everyone who has watched and now listened to the podcast, because I do really see it, and all those comments, like, even if it's just an emoji or something, and kind of just that you're watching it, like when not that long ago, a couple of months ago, when me and Matt kind of decided that we were going to be doing 2 episodes a day going forward, and kind of how that blew up, and like the shorts, they're blooming. I couldn't imagine when Matt went, "Oh, we're going to do shorts now." I went, "Fine," and we both had no idea how on earth it was going to work, and it's blown up. Like, there's a reason why I haven't gone with How I Met Your Mother. Oh, that's not quite working, let's not do that. But it is, like, especially on the shorts, like at least, like, most times, because obviously you should know this by now, there are now 2 shorts for each episode of the podcast. At least one of them, you're looking over 500 views. Now that to me is like an alien concept. Like, that is blooming massive. That anyone's actually watching, never mind the amount of subscribers and the amount of commenters and the amount of stuff. And obviously, it's not just me that does the podcast, it's me that writes and records the episode primarily, and most of the time. But obviously Matt as well, who obviously contacted me about animating the episode. That's kind of where kind of the podcast became more regular, which, because Matt, I remember it, Matt had thrown the idea around of kind of doing episodes every day. And then for the first time he asked, I was like, I don't think so. And then kind of I messaged him, I remember it, and I went kind of, is this still something you'd be able to do? Because obviously, even though I'm able to do something, doesn't mean that Matt is. So I needed to make sure he was. And then obviously, recently, the last few months, having 2 episodes a day. Like, the idea, and that's kind of why Chuck's had to step in, because I've gone from, because I think I was still, especially when I was recording episodes, I was in that kind of, still in that, doing 1 episode a day, so that's 7 episodes a week, but doubling that, and figuring it out and work, and sometimes if I work back-to-back days, which I do quite a lot, then obviously that I'm then having to think more ahead with the podcast, but I'm trying my best with that. But I also want to say that I hope that the podcast has helped you and is helping you. I was about to say that sounds like I'm leaving or anything. I'm not, I promise. The podcast isn't ending. But yeah, I don't really see a place in my life where that's going to happen. But yeah, like I might take a break or whatever, but I wouldn't like end it and go, okay, that's the podcast done. No, that's not happening. It would be a great Liverpool's Fool's Day. I had actually thought about that, but I thought that might be a bit too cruel. And I've told you what it is, so you know now. But yeah, just a reminder that kind of back to what I wanted this episode to cover, that being mental health, that kind of, for me, the podcast was that. The podcast kind of brought out and still does, brought out bits of me that kind of I don't always recognise and go, oh, that's nice. Like the joy, like especially, like I must have mentioned it in some of my How I Met Your Mother episodes, that kind of I've watched it previously, so I know where it ends up, and obviously there's no spoilers or anything, but kind of, and I'm enjoying going back and obviously recapping all these episodes because there are a lot of them. But yeah, it is quite tricky. And when I'm having a bad day, and I've actually said this to Matt before, that actually recording the podcast helps, because as I mentioned, it's not kind of how I am usually as much, but it is kind of most of it's me, but like dialed up to like 11 basically is how I see it. But yeah, I just, like, for me, so I basically, what I'm trying to say, a long-winded way of basically going, I hope the podcast has helped you as much as it's helped me. And I hope you keep watching and listening and commenting and subscribing and liking and sharing and all of those things, because the podcast is, now I've said this about as well, that I've been lucky that if most of the comments as well are never anything nasty, and if they are, they're about the intro, which I actually haven't mentioned really. But Matt didn't even tell me he'd done it, and I just put on one of the episodes. I was like, oh, this is it. So I really, really liked that. And he did, and it's great, and it's still there. Yeah, so. Yeah, so this is a very different episode. We'll be back to normal, if there is a normal, because obviously I cover loads and loads of different things on the podcast, but kind of I want to do kind of some of these life updates and stuff from time to time. But without further ado, actually, in the comments below, let me know one way in which the podcast has helped you in any aspect of your life. It doesn't have to be mentally. It could be in any aspect of your life. I'd love to hear the impact of the podcast. And if you can't think of any, maybe one of your favourite episodes of the podcast as well, you can put your thoughts on both of those in the comments below. As well, with anything else you want for the chance, such as any previews or recaps, put those in the comments below as well. Remember, also like, comment, and subscribe. And as I've mentioned a lot during this episode, there are 2 episodes of the podcast released every single day, with the first episode released at 11 a.m. GMT and the second episode released at 3 p.m. GMT. And also, the phlegm. I wasn't getting upset. I just had phlegm in my mouth. I was speaking and my mouth went, so I just had to give myself a minute. What was I going to say? Yeah, so obviously the YouTube episode will always be there. I've not deleted any of the episodes, so they're all still there. So if you want to go back and watch them, please feel free. But yeah, please keep watching the YouTube episodes because Matt spends a lot of work. I basically supply the audio. That's basically my job in the podcast world. But what else was I going to say? If you don't want to watch that, but please still do. There is also a audio only version of the podcast now available. So if you go on to the podcast, it's the podcast's X page, not the easiest sentence to say, titled Xing with the Everything Podcast. Click on post, find one of the most recent ones where it's got Spreaker. Click on the link, you should be able to listen from there. Without further ado, I will see you in a future episode of the podcast. See you then. Goodbye.